Welcome to the Enneagram in a Movie podcast, part of the Awareness to Action podcast network. I'm TJ Dawe, and this season my co-host Mario Sikora and I will be exploring the Enneagram through the lens of specific directors whose work demonstrates themes related to the 9 Enneagram types and 3 instinctual biases. If you like what you hear, please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. In the meantime, make some popcorn, sit back, and enjoy the show.
Movie number 2 that we're going to talk about today is in many ways a real change in direction. Malcolm X. Malcolm X is 1992 American epic biographical drama film about the African-American activist Malcolm X. Directed and co-written by Spike Lee, stars Denzel Washington in the movie that he should have won an Academy Award for. I do not know who won it that year. I meant to look it up, but it would have saddened me too much, I'm sure. Denzel won it, I think, the next year for The Hurricane.
No,
it was Training Day. He won it for Training Day, right?
About a decade later.
Oh, it was a decade later. Okay, all right. So I think he was nominated for The Hurricane too, but he didn't win for that, I guess. All right. So, yeah. Boy, what a performance of Denzel Washington. So anyway, let's see. So he's in the title role, also starring Angela Bassett, Albert Hall, Al Freeman Jr., who is, I think, great as Elijah Muhammad, Delroy Lindo, a frequent Spike Lee collaborator. Lee has a supporting role, as does, appearances by Bobby Seale, founder of the Black Panthers, Al Sharpton, makes a quick cameo, and Nelson Mandela shows up at the end of the movie. It's the second of 4 film collaborations between Washington and Lee. So, Malcolm X. Malcolm X, one of the towering figures of the civil rights movement. He was, I don't know, in some ways the yang to Martin Luther King Jr.'s yin. Greatly misunderstood, scared the bejesus out of white people in the early to mid 60s, for good reason, quite frankly, right? Justifiable reasons. But the movie traces him. I think the movie's 3.5 hours long almost. I mean, it's a really long movie, right? And it traces him, Malcolm X's story from his youth as, kind of a hoodlum and a thief, until he gets arrested, sent to jail for a crime that his white female accomplices did not receive harsh sentences for. By the way, do you guys know who played the judge in that scene? Do you know who that guy was? The judge who sentences Malcolm X to prison is William Kunstler, who was a civil rights attorney who most famously defended the Chicago 7, which was a good movie about from, the guy who did West Wing, the writer-director.
Aaron Sorkin.
Thank you, TJ. Right. So anyway, quick cameo by William Kunstler, which was an interesting nod to the time. So Malcolm goes to prison. He is... he is a resistant prisoner, right? For sure. Spends a lot of time in the hole and, tries to combat, having his dignity taken away. Eventually comes under the influence of Albert Hall, who is a minister in the Nation of Islam, converts to Islam, in particular the approach espoused by the Nation of Islam. And then, like many converts, becomes quite vocal in his advocacy of the message of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, as he's referred to throughout. Eventually, however, the nation starts to turn on him. He starts to become, number one, too big, right? He's getting well known because of how effective he is. And then Malcolm starts to become disillusioned by the behavior of Elijah Muhammad, finds out that he's not quite as pure as Malcolm had thought. He leaves. I'm not sure if he left or was thrown out of the Nation of Islam. I think there's 2 perspectives on it, and kind of starts his own approach. He has a conversion to a more traditional version of Islam. Goes to Mecca, spends time in Egypt, comes back, is we'll say mellowed a little bit. I don't know if mellow is quite the word. I'd like to think he matures a bit because some of his rhetoric was pretty harsh, prior to that. I mean, there's the famous episode that actually even went too far for the Nation of Islam, where he referred to the assassination of Kennedy as chickens coming home to roost, which, did not go over well, was, fond of referring to white people as devils and that sort of thing. So he softened his stance on a few things and eventually was assassinated. Thought that the Nation of Islam was behind it, or at least some members of the Nation of Islam were behind it. But what a movie. I mean, just what a powerful story. Wonderfully told. It was extremely well directed and crafted. Again, I kept thinking, all right, this is a 3.5 hour movie. What would I take out? And there wasn't a whole lot, maybe the first third or so, but I didn't think there was a weak scene in it, and told a huge story. Again, I think Denzel Washington's best performance embodied Malcolm X. Not an easy thing to do. Malcolm was a hugely charismatic person. What else, guys? Tell me about your reaction to Malcolm X. Let me hear from you first, Milton.
Yeah, it was some of the best 3 hours I've watched a movie, because there's some 3 hour movies you're like, all right, I could have kept this and saved this for the back in the day, the Blu-ray extra release copy or whatever. Right. Like, I didn't need all this. But I think Spike Lee did an amazing job with all the scenes he added to really help people see a build-up in a totality of the humanity of Malcolm X. Not just the box that people have, because there's multiple boxes, and if you don't fit in that box of Malcolm X, then it's gonna. So he widens the container and tries to take the container away so you can see him as an actual person. And so this is one movie I definitely have seen before. I rewatched it, and it moved me. And one thing it does, it helps me to really appreciate it, because I have uncles. Before I ever watched the movie, I knew about Malcolm X, grew up, school stuff, people talking about it, but I hadn't really delved into some of his work in his life. And it's quite amazing, because my uncles, which we'll go to the next movie and we'll kind of talk about that, but they went, down there, and they got pictures and everything, and so they had a rich connection with Malcolm X and the Nation of Islam. And I had a couple of uncles who were like, it was like they were half and half, like they were a Nation of Islam, but not completely at the same time. And so they'd be passing out pamphlets sometimes and saying stuff, but then you look at their behavior, you'd be like, are you sure you with them? All right. But nevertheless, it helped me to see, because I think I was also raised where I didn't get the full totality of Malcolm X, right? It helped me to see more of like the amazing way that he brought dignity to African Americans, and how important like his role was in the civil rights movement for Black people and Black communities. Yeah. Because he gave it things that like the Ying, like Martin Luther King, didn't necessarily give to the Black community, right? You need a little bit of both. So I absolutely loved it. And yeah, I just felt that he represented, once again, the variance and the totality of Black people, the message, everything, the way he, we hit the type 1 part too, the way he like hit the different sides, and like, it's just beautiful. Yeah. A couple of things, it's funny because in the simplistic history of that time, Martin was the nice guy and Malcolm was the scary guy, right? The one who seemed to advocate for violence. And I think this movie makes it clear that Malcolm wasn't as scary as, we might have, thought in retrospect. Again, I'll say you can understand why white people in particular were unnerved by what he was saying at the time, because no Black man had ever spoken like that before. Right. I mean, and gotten away with it, right. And if you go back and read some of Martin Luther King's writings,
he wasn't as cuddly as we might think that he was, right? So,
No,
right? So, so I think this movie really helped to, like you say, humanize it. And again, there is this moral core that is very one-ish. It's this, this is what's right. And even it's why I think the betrayal that he felt from the Nation of Islam, particularly when he started to find out that Elijah Muhammad had, children by, multiple women. Malcolm was just crushed by that, right? Of, being disillusioned. At first tried to rationalize it, right? Until he couldn't anymore, and then had to take a moral stance. And so, TJ, reaction to Malcolm X.
Yeah, a couple of things. Just to build on what Milton was saying, I found this quote from a Spike Lee interview where he said, "I think we're helping redefine Malcolm X because for the most part, white people's view came from the white media, which portrayed him as anti-white, anti-Semitic, and pro-violence." It's funny, when we had the national press junket for this film, many of the white journalists said they felt they'd been robbed, that they'd been cheated because they'd never been taught about Malcolm X in school, or they'd only been told that he was anti-white and violent. A great miseducation has gone on about this man. So there's a huge one-ishness in that statement, which I'm sure underlies his desire to make the movie, is we have to right this wrong. This man has been villainized unjustly, and the world needs to know from a black person, because that's another detail. Norman Jewison was originally going to be slated to direct this. Spike Lee lobbied to get the movie, and he also acknowledged that Norman Jewison graciously said, "You're right. It should be you and not me," and he didn't have to do that. But that's part of his reasoning, is saying, as a black man, I have a sense that this is a man from my community that needs to be portrayed accurately to the world, particularly to white people. And then he also said, in that Charlie Rose interview, he interviewed hundreds of people who knew Malcolm, and he couldn't imagine them opening up to a white filmmaker the way they would to a black filmmaker. So again, there's this fire in his belly and in his eyes just to make this movie about a figure who himself was like that. And then another quote about it that I thought was really interesting. He said, Malcolm was a very complex person. He was constantly evolving his outlook and his ideology and always trying to seek the truth. If he found it, he was not scared of being called a hypocrite. If he found a higher truth, he would say, "I was wrong. All that stuff I said before is wrong, and this is what I believe." And that's something very few people do. And I think that statement itself speaks to the very high side of one. Ones in general are constantly trying to improve themselves, but the area of life that's probably hardest for one, maybe for anybody at all, to do is to improve their own moral sensibilities. It's a lot easier to say, I could sit up straighter, or I could, participate more in the housework, where I live. It's a lot harder to say this fundamental idea that animated my actions and my interactions with the world was incomplete and flawed. And upon reflection, with new evidence, I'm choosing to admit that publicly, especially for a big public figure, and say, this is what I believe now. What I said before wasn't 100% right, and I regret having said that.
Right. Again, this takes us back to this quality of objectivity I mentioned earlier, right? Of this willingness to say, oh, no, wait, this is what the evidence is. This is what I believe now, and that's okay, right? The unhealthy one is the one that holds on to the rigidity, no, I am right. And as an executive coach, I remember once working with a guy, was a transmitting one, who, when he was struggling in his role, and his boss wanted me to work with him, and his reaction was, I'm doing fine. There's nothing I'm going to learn from you. He literally said that to me upon meeting him. There's nothing I'm going to learn from you. I know what I'm doing, and I'll be okay. And then 6 months later, he called me out of the blue and said, you know what, I'm struggling and I need help, and was a completely different person. Right. So again, it was this, this guy had it, and he ended up being one of my, I'd say, most successful clients in terms of, creating change in himself. Because of that, no, it's important to improve. It's important to grow once I recognize it, let go of my fears and so forth. So well, let's see a couple of other things. I keep thinking about the scenes in Egypt. There was actually one of the mosques that he was in. There was one with red carpets. I don't know if you guys remember, but I've actually been to that mosque and been in there, which was really cool. I've been to Egypt a number of times, and so that was nice for me. I think it's the first time I've watched it since I've been to Egypt. And I also always laugh at the scenes where people are at the pyramids, because just to give you guys, Milton, I'm sorry, have you ever been to Cairo and the pyramids? No. Okay.
Not yet.
Okay, not yet. Good. Take the chance and go if you can. But the pyramids are right on the edge of the city, right? So across the street from the Sphinx is a Kentucky Fried Chicken. Okay. So yeah. But on the other side of the pyramids is desert as far as you can see. Right. So they always film it from the desert side. Right. And so, they're riding the camels and they look like they've got to take these camels out on this long journey or something, So I always get such a kick out of the way they portray the pyramids in movies, because, if you're looking this direction, you would think it's right in the middle of the city. If you're looking this direction, you would think it's in the middle of the desert something. Right. So it was a fun kick for me to see.
Get your chicken and walk over and see the Sphinx.
It's crazy. It's just the craziest damn thing you ever saw. I mean, it's literally right across the street is more stores and more people and knick-knack shops and all that sort of stuff. But great stuff. Now, granted, it was 1963. It might have been a little bit different. The Kentucky Fried Chicken might not have been there, but you get my point. Let's see. What else do we want to say about Malcolm X? Again, I just want to point out great use of music from the period. Curtis Mayfield, his music shows up throughout the movie a number of places, right? So People Get Ready. There was a couple other songs they used. I can't remember. New World Order, a great Curtis Mayfield song from his last movie. I'm sorry, his last CD. Curtis Mayfield, for those anybody not familiar with him, a musician from the 1960s, black musician who was one of the first black musicians to get ownership of his publishing rights. And, famously, Berry Gordy from Motown would, own all the publishing rights. So the singers would, not make a lot of money. The songwriters would not make a lot of money. He came along and said, no, I am going to own my music. Kind of a one-ish stance, right? And if you look at the music of Curtis Mayfield, such as Superfly, the Superfly soundtrack, there is this one-ish tone of making this moral statement about the world that he's seeing. So, I don't know. You Curtis Mayfield fan, Milton?
Oh yeah,
he's before your time, but
he is. But I was raised on like old school music, so I definitely know that my mom loved her some Curtis Mayfield. She's like, he be telling the truth. I'm like, you're right. You're right, though. It's the raw, rugged truth. You true. It's right.
Yeah. Sad story with Curtis Mayfield. He was there was a concert, and a rack of lights fell on him, paralyzed him, and it cut short his life. Although he did manage to make one final wonderful album before he passed in I think the late 80s, early 90s. I feel like we haven't done justice to this movie, but again, I'll just tell people, the one theme filters throughout this. I have seen places where Malcolm X is identified as an Enneagram Type 6. I don't know. I haven't explored Malcolm X, watched his videos, studied enough about him. Every depiction I've seen of him, if you've seen the movie, what is it, Godfather of Harlem, the TV series about Bumpy Johnson that Malcolm X plays a part of. There's always a whole lot of one stuff going on here. And I think as he's played by Denzel Washington, clearly another transmitting one character. I don't know. Any debate for you guys on that?
Yeah, for me, I saw some six in there. I saw some transmitting six going on there. And I think of it from the lens of, and this is the qualities that 1 and 6 both have in common. When it's like, I'm finding a rule, I'm finding an authority, something to cling to. Mm-hmm. I think of when he was with, everything was Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Like, and he was like down, he was like, I would give my life for him. Yeah. And then, and I don't know whether this is like to say that maybe he's not a 6 or definitely is a 6 to a certain degree when he talks about like not being able to comprehend betrayal. So that was like that right there, because he had found what he was clung to. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh my goodness, I have to unravel all of this. And I've actually know a 6 in my personal life that has had a journey like that. Like he didn't go to Mecca, he's not with the Nation of Islam, but he's had a spiritual journey in that type of way where he was so fixated on like a very watered down, basic, unintelligent, really spiritual faith. And then it came into crumbles, the foundation, and it sent him in a tailspin. He couldn't believe it. But now he's coming on the other side, and like he's more grounded. He has a better nuance of his spiritual component. So I do see that. I mean, if he's the one, I wouldn't be shocked either. Yeah. But yeah.
Yeah, it's an inexact science, right? When we talk about these things, but I hear what you're saying and don't disagree. TJ?
There's no doubt in my mind that he's a transmitter.
Yeah.
And that comes across in every scene. So in the earlier scenes when he's a petty criminal, he really dresses in a peacock way. You know, he wears a bright red suit in one scene. You know, he wears this spiffy looking hat.
Yeah.
He just looks great. It doesn't hurt that Denzel Washington's incredibly handsome, but he's also got the charisma of a transmitter. And then later, when he's converted, so his personal style is much more reserved. You know, he hasn't. He wears his hair naturally, and he wears a very conservative suit. But his charisma as a preacher is undeniable.
Yeah.
And again, you know, some of that might be Denzel Washington's portrayal of him, but Denzel had played him off Broadway on stage. Like, he really studied this guy.
Yeah.
And just the way he's able to communicate from his heart, just how magnetic he is.
Yeah.
Transmitter right up and down.
Yeah.
Whether he's a 1 or a 6, to me, came into debate with those early scenes when he's a petty criminal. Because in those early scenes where it's the unhealthy version of him, he didn't seem like an unhealthy 1 in terms of like kind of the stuff I was saying earlier, browbeating, scolding, nitpicking, or anything like that. He was a petty criminal. He not in service of a higher cause or anything like that. He just seemed kind of like a bon vivant.
Right.
Like, I just want to have fun. I want to do drugs. I want to go dancing. I want to have sex. I want to get money for nothing. All of that. So hard to say, you know, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
But then the scenes later, when we see the Malcolm X that the world knew, there's this one particular scene that, well, for one thing, as we're seeing him turn into the Malcolm X that the world really got to know, any scene where he's preaching, the second time I saw the movie, I watched it twice and prepped for this, second time I found myself tearing up watching him because he just embodies dignity so much. And he is tremendously inspiring. And he's able to rein in that charisma in a certain way, in that he's not speaking loudly, but there's this one scene when one of the Muslim brothers has been taken by the police after being beaten by the police, and he leads a whole cadre of people to go get him, and he speaks quietly with precision and dignity the whole time. He's never rude, but he also won't take no for an answer. And he just embodies power without ever raising his voice, without ever doing anything threatening. And then through and this is a very one thing too, is like the police say, you can't see him. You're not a relative. You're not his lawyer. He still manages to see the guy. And then as soon as he sees him, he says, get an ambulance now. And they do. And then they say to him, okay, you got what you wanted. You know, now break it up. And he says, no, I'm not satisfied. To the hospital. And he leads the entire march to the hospital. And then when he finally gets confirmation from the doctor that he is being treated, he just turns to the crowd and just gently holds up his hand. And all the Muslims switch direction 90 degrees, and he points one finger, and they all march. And not everybody in that crowd is a Muslim. You know, a lot of people are chanting and waving their fists, but everybody follows. And the cop makes the comment, it's too much power for one man to have. But you never get the sense that he's drunk on his power.
Right.
You never get the sense that he believes that this is about him. And this is in the phase of his career where he was prefacing almost everything he said when he was preaching with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad tells us. You never got the sense that he wanted to have the top job. He was perfectly happy to pay homage to this spiritual leader who changed his life.
Yeah.
So I find that, again, could be very healthy 1, could be very healthy 6. It's hard to tell.
It's yes, and again, and we've talked about this, a number of times in these podcasts that most portrayals of characters are not pure Enneagram types because you bring different elements. If it's a real life person, you've got that person's Enneagram type, you've got the script, you've got the actor, you've got the influence of the director, right? So, like Tom Condon likes to say, it's a one-ish character or a six-ish character. There are some that are blatant. Enneagram type. John Wayne, always an 8, right? I mean, there's never any doubt about that sort of thing. Russell Crowe is, very clear, either an 8 or a 5 in all of his movies. But yeah. So again, for me, I could be comfortable with either interpretation. I'll also add that I think Denzel Washington is probably an 8 in real life, and so sort of adds another element, right? I think that Denzel kind of brings 8ness into, a lot of what he does that helps to flavor some of the characters also. But yeah, so again, great movie. I would say that as a biographical film, this stands up with anything. Honestly, I can't think of anything that is a better biopic than this. More watchable, more interesting, more informative. Watch Malcolm X.
And not only did it not win Best Picture, it wasn't even nominated. And Denzel Washington, I looked this up, lost Best Actor to Al Pacino in Scent of a Woman, which is yet another movie that no one references anymore. No one screens. Nobody cares about it. It won't make the top 10 list of Al Pacino's movies.
Yes. Yes. Look, speaks to the theme here of inherent institutional racism in so many of our things. There's just no other way to explain this, quite frankly.
Are you interested in learning more about our approach to the Enneagram? Go to awareness-to-action.com and check out our certification program. We offer a clear, concise, business-friendly, and science-minded approach while maintaining the depth of traditional approaches to the system. At Awareness to Action International, we're the leading innovators in the theory and pragmatic applications of this system to all aspects of the work environment, including leadership and personal development, team building, diversity and culture, and managing change. However, this approach is not just for the business world. A lot of people who attend our trainings do so for their own self-development or spiritual growth. Our certification program is one of only a handful of curricula accredited as a school by the International Enneagram Association. It is currently being conducted virtually and combines live sessions with asynchronous learning. Again, find out more at awareness-to-action.com.
Okay, so interesting shift into our next movie. And I think, TJ, you're going to tell us about Get on the Bus, right? By the way, I just want to say a movie I love and have seen multiple times and always feel really enraptured and uncomfortable watching Get on the Bus. Okay, but we'll get into that in a moment. Okay, so TJ, tell us about Get on the Bus, please.
So Get on the Bus came out in 1996. I believe it was released on the exact 1-year anniversary of the Million Man March in Washington, D.C., which was a big social activist movement in which 1 million Black men came to Washington, approximately, to highlight and pledge to work on economic and social challenges to the African-American community. So the story of the movie is it's about a dozen or so Black men who traveled to the march from LA to Washington on a travel bus. And they're a really diverse group. And the group includes an actor, a former gang member, a father and his teenage son who are shackled together as part of the son's parole for some robberies. There's a gay couple, there's an old man, there's a strict Muslim, there's an aspiring filmmaker documenting the trip, who at one point is referred to jokingly as Spike Lee Jr. And along the way, they talk, they argue, their views and prejudices about each other come to light. There's a fist fight at one point, and they eventually get to DC and traffic is jammed. And they're elated to be there and just see how many people are there for all the right reasons. And then they discovered that the senior member of the group, played by Ozzie Davis, has had a heart attack. They bring him to the hospital. He's treated, but he still dies. So the group ends the trip having been brought closer together in spite of all their differences. And we, the viewer, get to see a tremendous multiplicity of Black men. The movie came out in 1996. It was a complete flop at the box office. And it's still a very obscure movie. It's one of those movies when people talk about Spike Lee's body of work, rarely gets mentioned. Mario, if you hadn't mentioned it, I'd never heard of it, quite honestly.
Oh, really? Oh, interesting. Uh-huh.
Yeah. It's a largely forgotten movie, and unjustly so. It's excellent and has a tremendous ensemble cast with wonderful performances from everyone.
Yes. So you're right. Unheralded movie. Interesting to me. It was made for $2.4 million, made $5.6 million in the box office. So not a well-known movie. Incredible cast. Our third straight movie that features Ossie Davis. Now, he was very prominent in Do the Right Thing. Obviously, he played the mayor. Very prominent in this one. He's one of the major characters. And I don't know if you guys caught this, but he delivered the eulogy at Malcolm X's funeral in real life. So Ossie Davis and Ruby Dee from Do the Right Thing were very, very active in the civil rights movement in the 60s. And Ossie Davis did the eulogy for Malcolm X at his funeral. And that's what is playing at the end of Malcolm X. Milton, I'm curious about your reaction to Get on the Bus. Had you seen it before?
I had not seen it before, but it's interesting because it feels like when he makes movies, it feels like I've lived and experienced it because of my family and my growing up. So it's always interesting. It feels very familiar, even though I had not seen the movie. And so it was all of these, once again, polarizing or dualistic views on a variety of topics within like the Black community and period, just about leaders and just every single thing. Like it goes over so many different things, but they are views and things that I've heard of at family gatherings, things I've experienced. And I think primarily of my uncles, because they went. They have pictures. And like I said, even some of the uncles who do they do anything to really help like our society? No, they don't. But they all went. And so knowing that there was a part of the experience that they had that was some version of Get on the Bus, it really it brings it home to me, because there are these different views. There are these different complexities into how do we solve and work on these problems and these issues that Spike Lee, once again, is bringing up like, oh, here's the issue, here's a problem. What are we going to do about it? Are you going to be and then make you feel uncomfortable, but then bring you back in with the reality of life, which it was like, yeah, we doing all that bickering about stuff that like these things we do need to address, but they shouldn't divide us in a way that we forget about our real life sense of being able to see each other for who we really are and to be together, because that's more important.
So that last point there is the one that, always intrigues me about this, because I don't know that you could make this movie today with the same dialogue, right? Because again, number one, lots of profanity and that sort of thing, but homophobia, misogyny, anti-Semitism, it's all over the place. And on the one hand, the characters were almost stock characters, but they also felt tremendously human to me, right? You could tell that Spike was populating the bus with different types, because I want to talk about this, and I want to talk about this, I want to talk about this. So I need this guy, and I need this guy, and I need this guy. And I think this touches on what you were saying, Milton. These people feel like people that we know, all right? And it raises the question of how do we treat people that we love when they have characteristics about them that we can't abide by, right? How do we deal with that racist relative that is otherwise a good person, right? Right? But says things at gatherings that you're like, yeah, we don't say that anymore, right? Kind of thing. So for me, that speaks to the humanity of this movie and other Spike Lee movies.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
A couple of things I'll point out. One of the sub-themes is about the father and son. Again, we have this theme of fathers and sons that was in Do the Right Thing, but also here. And I'm drawing a blank on the two characters. The son was named Smooth, or that's what he called himself, but Evan and Evan Jr. And Evan Jr. had been caught stealing money at a grocery store and was, in a little bit of heavy-handed imagery here, sentenced to being shackled to his father for 3 days. And so they go to the Million Man March, literally in chains, which was kind of loaded and kind of disconcerting to some of the other participants. There were two gay men on the bus, which made some of the other passengers uncomfortable once that was exposed, right? And again, led to some really homophobic, insulting comments. Wendell Pierce, who joined the trip partway through, the car dealer who was going to the march to sell cars, was the Black Republican who came along for the trip. And, I don't think that his dialogue could be written today.
No, it could not.
So, Milton, I'm curious, again, so there has been an evolution in how people speak for the better, right? Things that we say, things that we don't say. I am curious about your reaction to the language.
Oh, it was realistic. It was authentic.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I appreciate most about Spike Lee's films. There's not a let me try to soften the blow, let me butter it up. No, it's raw. It's the truth. It's authentic. These are like I said, these are conversations I've heard being like growing up, like at Thanksgiving. You have uncles and cousins, and who I don't know if they're a relative or not, but they here eating with us, and there's an argument or a discussion, and they're talking about these subjects, and the words are just as strong as they were on the bus. So for me, it just felt really authentic and real, and I was like, yep, I've heard that. I've heard that perspective. Yep, that one too. So
a couple of parts. I don't think the part with Richard Belzer coming on as the substitute bus driver, I don't think was wholly effective in trying to capture that dynamic. It felt a little bit forced to me, a little bit, but the rest of it from, again, my perspective, look, I'm obviously a white man, but I lived in the city, all of my adult life. And so I know a lot of those people as well, right? So it rang true to me. And it was certainly fascinating to me that it spoke to the time. Again, Milton, you were you were a child then. I mean, it was
Young
7, 8
lad.
years old. Yeah, there you go, right? So, but, I remember the Million Man March vividly, and it was very polarizing at the time, right? Because even though it was for noble intent, Farrakhan was very polarizing at the time, right? I mean, and so there was this concern, and it was almost, again, thematically, a repetition of what we're finding today when the reaction among some to the slogan or the phrase Black Lives Matters is, well, all lives matter, right? So there was a reaction in the air of, well, why should it just be a Black Man March kind of thing, right? What's the point of that? Again, misunderstanding or not appreciating what the true circumstances was. So for me, this really captured the time in a way that I think Do the Right Thing did as well, but most movies don't.
There's two things that popped up for me. One thing is kind of speaking to, even connecting to the movie Malcolm X, about when he's first speaking from Elijah Muhammad, there is Black supremacy, a part of it coming out. Like all of it's not, but some of it is, right? And there's reasons for it and everything. And even looking at it to the levels of get on the bus, like Louis Farrakhan, to very like, and like he was strong. And there's like it's not always like a direct Black supremacy necessarily, but there's a form of we've got to get ourselves together before we can like engage with anyone else, and separate ourselves a little bit to like do this or completely, depending on the perspective. So I find that to be the thing that is probably one of the most polarizing or scariest things, because first of all, the whole supremacy thing, nobody needs to do that. But number two is that, like the book Cast talks about how like we have a hierarchy that's been built in. It's like an invisible hierarchy. It's not invisible, but there's not necessarily set rules like the caste system and feudalism in Europe, but we have it where the hierarchy, and so looking at it that way helps to like really put the lens in a more of a perspective where it makes sense, but it sucks that, like you said, there's reactions every time there is a unification or Black people as a whole find a way to be more dignified. There is a hard reaction to all of a sudden, like we have to make sure that they don't, get there. Really quick, throwing this in there. I'm going to throw this in there. The reaction to President Obama being a president. The reaction of who was elected next is purely a reaction. It wasn't based on who I feel could be purely reaction.
Yes.
Because of the cast. Like, it's like somebody from the lower cast is here. So, yeah.
I completely agree with you. Not to go too egghead on this, but this is kind of what Hegel was all about when in reactions to history, right? So one event causes a reaction overlying it. From there we get Hegelian dialectics, actually this interpretation of what Hegel was talking about too. And some would say there's kind of a law of three thing there. There's this reaction and so forth, but not in a positive way, certainly with, in honor of Spike Lee, Agent Orange, as the reaction to, because there was a Vanity Fair interview where they asked Spike Lee, who or what do you hate? And he said, I don't hate anything. No, wait, Agent Orange. And then something like that. So anyway, yeah. So I don't think we lost viewers on that one. No, don't worry about it. So, all right. So good. Thank you, Milton. TJ, get on the bus.
Yeah, I don't know that I agree with what the both of you said, is that this movie wouldn't necessarily be made today with that language, particularly because the homophobes are proven wrong. And Wendell Pierce, as the bootstrapping Republican, is literally thrown off the bus.
Yeah.
That's a statement that I hear people also make about the movie Blazing Saddles. People say, that would never be a great movie, never be made today. We're all too politically correct and woke. Well, a Black guy was part of the writing team. And the whole gist of the movie is that all the white racists in that small town in the Old West are wrong and eventually come around and realize that this Black sheriff is a wonderful guy. And they love him. Anyway.
Yes. And let me just say, I like to hope that a movie like this could be made today, right? And, maybe I'm wrong. Yeah, anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, one of the interviews I read was with a publication called The Advocate, which is a gay publication, and they interviewed Spike Lee before this movie, maybe a year or two before it, and took him to task for his characters using homophobic slurs in his movies, and he was not having any of it. Yeah. And he rebutted that many Black people talk like this. That doesn't mean that it's right, but many Black people were raised by the church and are therefore very conservative in their views of at least social and sexual politics. It doesn't mean he agrees with it, but that is the landscape that people like this come from. Very similarly, he says he got a lot of criticism for Do the Right Thing and the fact that there weren't any drugs, no drug dealers, no drug users. And his response to that was, that's too big of a theme to be dealt with as a subtopic in Do the Right Thing. And then he eventually addressed it in a much bigger way in both Jungle Fever and in Clockers. It's a central theme of Clockers, is the way crack was decimating Black communities. So it was interesting that interview with The Advocate came out a year before this. And then we've got these two gay characters and we've got the homophobia of many other people on that bus, which leads to a fist fight, which the gay guy wins. Yeah. And over the course of him winning, he cites Langston Hughes and James Baldwin. So that really seemed like, the justice warrior in Spike Lee coming up and saying, any Black people who are homophobic, get real, get with the program, because there are important Black figures who are gay in the past and in the present. And that's not good enough to just accept these morals that you might have been raised in.
Yeah.
And then similarly with Wendell Pierce as the bootstrapping Republican, he cites Colin Powell. And, people have sometimes will cite somebody like Colin Powell as saying we're post-racial now. Look, you got a Black man as the Joint Chief of Staff, or in the case of Obama, a Black man as the president. Or in the 80s, we've got Bill Cosby as the #1 sitcom star, or Eddie Murphy as the #1 movie star. And Spike Lee's response to that is having one person in a position of power doesn't mean we're post-racial at all. And in the case of Colin Powell, a Republican who's now going to use his power to bomb people of color in the Middle East. How is that an improvement on anything?
Yeah.
So he's really bringing that up. And I think the overall theme of the movie is, and watching a bunch of his movies, I think if there's any point he's trying to make in his entire body of work, it's this, is that there are many different kinds of Black people.
Yes.
And the entertainment industry has, up until Spike Lee, really presented one or two kinds of Black people. There's the subservient servant or the buffoon, kind of hand in hand with that. And, blackface tradition was the number one form of popular entertainment in America for 100 years in the entertainment industry. White people did blackface, Black people did blackface. And the character of somebody in blackface was the happy simpleton slave.
Yeah.
So there was that image. And then eventually there were some more images, but he said, an Eddie Murphy character or Richard Pryor character, at least as Richard Pryor was portrayed in the movies, was the comedic character, but it wasn't a three-dimensional character. They didn't really have a family. They didn't have sexual relationships. And then, a friend of mine, Nicole Stamp, pointed out there's this dichotomy that you still see in a lot of entertainment, which is the Black person who's really Black and the Black person who's rejected their Blackness. Fresh Prince of Bel-Air is an example of that. Are you the Will Smith character or are you Carlton? And, usually it's like the down Black guy shows the uptight Black guy how to be Black again, that kind of thing. But that's very limited.
Yeah.
So in Do the Right Thing, you've got many different kinds of Black people. And in this movie, you've got many different kinds. You've got a biracial guy. You've got a dark Black guy. You've got a cop. You've got gay characters. You've got homophobes. You've got the bootstrapping Republican. You've got the former gang member. You've got many, many different kinds of Black people. And you see that throughout his movies. It's just like there are many different stories that aren't being told about Black people. Don't think of us as one thing.
Yeah. Agreed. Great. A couple of characters I want to call out just for people to observe. Andre Braugher, probably his character was perhaps the least likable on the bus, right? But I just love Andre Braugher. I mean, man, oh man, can that guy act? And I think we mentioned him before, TJ, in one of our podcasts. But he was, I first noticed him on Homicide: A Life in the Street. Back in the 80s, I think it was, late 80s maybe. Great actor. The Dead Too Early Bernie Mac, who has a pretty small role, but two of my favorite lines from the movie, right? When he throws Wendell Pierce's coat to him. It's a shame because, for me, I just can't repeat the lines, but watch the movie and you know what I mean. And then the line when they asked him how his bubblegum company is doing, and he says, it's blowing up, which I just thought was fantastic. Right? Again, the movie, the irony of the movie is, or I don't know if it's irony, but the twist of the movie is, I guess, is that they never actually make it to the Million Man March because the Ossie Davis character, who is, again, sort of the moral center of the movie in a way, right, has a heart attack on the way. And so they end up at the hospital and missing the march because they choose to stand by him rather than leaving him alone at the hospital. They're going to the march. And this movie ends at the Lincoln Memorial in Washington. They get together and they read the letter from Ossie Davis's character. And when they leave, the chains that were holding the father and son together are left behind at the foot of Abraham Lincoln, which I thought was a very nice, touching scene. Have you guys ever been to the Lincoln Memorial, particularly at night? Have you, Milton? You've been there?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. TJ,
no,
you have not been there. One of the most majestic and moving sights. It's a huge, towering. Milton, if you can't see him, just rose his hands up. It rises as you go. It's first of all, the memorial's at the top of steps, and then you look up at Lincoln, and if you read the sections from the speeches on the walls, you have to stand, look up, and it's a cathedral in a sense. It's a secular cathedral in many ways, and just a powerful and suitable ending to the movie, I thought.
There's footage of the actual Million Man March at the climax of the movie. And that's a theme you see in a lot of Spike Lee movies. At the end of Malcolm X, there's a lot of documentary footage of Malcolm X himself.
Yes.
The beginning of Malcolm X shows footage of the Rodney King beating.
Yes.
The end of Bamboozled shows maybe a 3, maybe longer minute montage of blackface imagery in American pop culture. And Black Klansman ends with footage of the Charlottesville March and of the horrible murder of a counter-protester by that guy driving the car. So that's something you see in a lot of Spike Lee movies, is real-world footage just to show this is real.
I'm not making this up.
Yeah. This is pertinent to the world we live in now. Malcolm X isn't about what happened 30 years ago. This is relevant to what's happening today. Yeah. He makes a strong point of emphasizing that in a lot of his movies.
Are you interested in learning more about our approach to the Enneagram? Go to awareness-to-action.com and check out our certification program. We offer a clear, concise, business-friendly, and science-minded approach while maintaining the depth of traditional approaches to the system. At Awareness to Action International, we're the leading innovators in the theory and pragmatic applications of this system to all aspects of the work environment, including leadership and personal development, team building, diversity and culture, and managing change. However, this approach is not just for the business world. A lot of people who attend our trainings do so for their own self-development or spiritual growth. Our certification program is one of only a handful of curricula accredited as a school by the International Enneagram Association. It is currently being conducted virtually and combines live sessions with asynchronous learning. Again, find out more at awareness-to-action.com.
I encourage people to seek out and get on the bus. Again, for me, mesmerizing. And I will say that I found myself teary-eyed at the end of all 3 of these movies, right? You know, I'm not a softie in most senses. I do cry every time I watch Rocky, but each of these movies hits you like a gut punch in a way. And for me, leaves me feeling at the same time both overwhelmed and hopeful in an odd way. Right. So I don't know if you guys can see over my shoulder here, but I've got the 2 Buddhas here, the weeping Buddha and the happy Buddha. There's a concept in Buddhism that Chogyam Trungpa used to talk about called sorrow joy. Right. That life is about holding both sorrow and joy at the same time. And I think Lee captures that well. Go ahead, Bill.
This is interesting. You say that with the 7 and the 4 as the people listen
to. Yes, there you go. That hadn't quite occurred to me. Yeah, so I got the happy Buddha and the sad Buddha with me here. Although TJ's not a sad, so, all right, or at least not in his public experience with me. So,
but I know it quite well.
I'm sure you do. All right. Okay, great. All right. So our final movie in Spike Lee is the movie called Inside Man. And we've referred to it a few times already. And something very different. It's not as much of a Spike Lee joint as most Spike Lee joints are, right? For those of you who don't know, that's what he calls his movies, Spike Lee joints. Inside Man is a movie about, well, you could say in a very simple level, it's about a bank robbery, right? And the police detectives and hostage negotiators involved in that. But it's about quite a bit more, and it's a very complex film. It is a really well done heist movie, I'll say, if we want to think of it that way. It's lots of twists and turns, and there's some interesting characters, I don't know so much that I'd call them subplots, because they are the plots that drive the movie, in the sense that it's a robbery of a bank owned by a wealthy banker, played by Christopher Plummer. For old people like me, would remember him from The Sound of Music. He also played a very similar sort of character when he played J.P. Getty in, drawn a blank on the name of that movie, about the kidnapping of Getty's grandson and the refusal to pay a ransom over it, right? It's that rigidity. So anyway, Arthur Case, played by Christopher Plummer, made his money in the aftermath of World War II, or during World War II, by collaborating with the Nazis. And for some reason, kept evidence of his collaboration in a safe deposit box in his the main branch of his bank that did not exist on paper but was there and held these secrets. He had spent his life trying to atone from his sins. By the way, the thing we forgot to mention regarding Get on the Bus, it was referred to as a day of atonement. Right, that was the idea behind the march. And again, we have this theme of atonement, of making up for one's sins. Right, at the same time of being made whole. Right, is what atonement is, being washed clean of our sins. And Arthur Case had devoted his life to good works to make up for the money he made off of the Nazis' treatment of Jews during the Holocaust and World War II. He enlists a interesting sort of fixer character played by Jodie Foster, who I think is just excellent in this, in a relatively small role, but impactful. And but the main characters are Denzel Washington, who plays police detective and hostage negotiator Keith Frazier. I think that's the first name. Yeah, Detective Keith Frazier. And by Clive Owen, who is the mastermind of the bank robbery, who plays a character named Dalton Russell. Again, the movie was set to be made by Ron Howard, and you can see it as a Ron Howard film for sure, right? It is just kind of a procedural sort of heist movie, but given really interesting twists and having this sort of moral component to it through the lens of, oddly enough, the bank robber, right? The bank robber is kind of the most traditionally ethical sort of character, you know, in a way, right? In what he is setting out to do. So, I don't know, guys, tell me about your reaction to Inside Man.
Yeah, I think it was. I think it was brilliant the way that it was directed. I think, like you said, the bank robber was literally brilliant. One of the first things that was really interesting. I think, from perspective, is like how I felt it. If I'm looking at my three sensors, like this one was really, it lit up my brain more than anything. Whereas the other three and other Spike Lee joints hit me in the gut.
Yeah.
This one didn't hit me in the gut, but it really excited my mind with how clever the heist went off and the underlining meaning behind the actual heist to affect like something that had been done before, which was making money off of like the lives of people in the past and like, oh, I'm going to do right now to try to atone. So it's very interesting dynamic. A movie that I really enjoy just because the way it even ended. I like the way that it kind of left it, but it ended in such a beautiful way.
Yeah. Again, different in the themes. I agree with you. It was kind of a head movie. It was, kind of a popcorn movie in some ways too. Not like a Marvel characters, popcorn movie, but it was entertaining. Right, made you think, intriguing. Didn't touch on race as much. There were a couple of scenes that did touch on race, but it was not the reason for the movie. Right, like other Spike Lee movies tend to be. How about you, TJ? What's your reaction to Inside Man?
Yeah, very much. Like it's a puzzle. The robbery is not the robbers make it seem like this is a complicated, sophisticated set of thieves going at this, but underneath it, the reason they're doing it is a moral imperative. And the movie starts with the Clive Owen robber character addressing the camera, so that's never quite explained. Is he filming himself saying this? Is this going to be released at some point online? Like that's not clear. But what he says is, here's who I am, and he uses his own name. Here's where I am. He says the why, because I can. And once it's clear what he's done and why he's done it, namely to bring justice to a war profiteer, somebody who literally made money and built a fortune off of Holocaust victims, you get the sense of like, this guy took a huge risk in doing this because it's the right thing to do and didn't steal $1 from the bank.
No, he stole the diamonds, actually. Right, not from the bank. Not from the bank. He stole them from Arthur Case. So he did. There was a profit motive in the movie, right? Because he did steal the diamonds, and he took the information related to the Nazis as kind of an insurance policy to tell Arthur Case, don't come after me, right? Don't you make a big deal out of this, right? So yeah, but he understood that this guy was vulnerable because of his sins, right? And I am going to make him pay. and make it clear that somebody he knows, there is accountability in a sense.
And there were giant stacks of cash that they didn't touch.
Yes.
Like they easily could have taken any or huge amounts of that just because it's there. And it would be great to be really rich with untraceable cash. And they didn't. And then it comes out at the end, they were using fake guns.
Mm-hmm.
They never put anyone in actual danger. They staged a killing to make it look like it was real. But that was just a prop with fake blood. So it wasn't like, if you want to make an omelet, you got to break some eggs. It wasn't that at all. It's like, we're going to do this thing and we're going to make sure that there are no actual victims to this, other than the fear and trauma of the people who are, hostages or believe that they're in danger. And then whether they find out later that they weren't, doesn't matter. They still believed it for that amount of time. And that would be a horrible traumatic experience. But they were never in danger of actually being killed with bullets, at least from the robbers.
Right. A couple of things too. So the reason I thought of this as a one-ish sort of movie, okay, again, because there was this idea of justice to, someone who, had done wrong, even though, again, one has to ask, at what point do we offer forgiveness, right? I mean, at what point, have we paid for our crimes? And, that's always a question. And it's one that is here as well. But the precision of the bank robber, of Dalton Russell, right? He said, look, listen closely, because I only say things once. I don't repeat myself. And, and so there was this, and there was just this methodical, deliberate, perfect crime, okay, in a sense. And in fact, they don't even pursue it at the end, because they pull off the crime in such a way that there's no evidence that a crime actually took place, because the only thing that's missing are the jewels and the documents out of a post office box owned by Arthur Case, which does not exist on paper, right? So there's no crime to pursue, even though they got away with the diamonds and the documents. Okay, so very one-ish there, and there were just these touches with the Dalton Russell character. I particularly think of the scene where the kid was playing the video game on the little handheld device, and it was I don't even know if it was an amplified version of, what was it, Grand Theft Auto, that was pretty gruesome. And here the bank robber is kind of offended by the gratuitous violence in the video game. So there was a bit of a statement there of, like, I have to talk to your father about this or something, right? So I saw him as kind of a one-ish character.
And that video game, by the way, was an addition to the script from Spike Lee. That was not in the original draft. And he had a video game created so that the screen would show that. And he told the video game developers, make the most brutal game you could possibly imagine. So he inserted this theme of, like, glorification of violence is not a good thing.
Yes. That is an interesting point, because in Spike Lee's movies, there's not that much violence, right? And when it is, it's shocking and always negative, right? I can't think of any glorification of violence in any of Spike Lee's movies that come to mind. Interesting theme.
Clockers has the exact opposite take on it. Clockers makes a great point of showing violence as a horrific thing.
Yes.
And the opening credits of Clockers shows, obviously, that it's something they've recreated, but shots of, like, photographs, close-up photographs of a shooting victim.
Yeah.
And he stated very specifically he made that movie to address the romanticization of violence in many, many movies that were coming out at the time.
Yes. Very good movie. I highly recommend it. The book was excellent, too. I read the book years ago. So by Richard Price, very, very good author. All right, great. Anything else, guys, about Inside Man that struck you as one-ish or highlighted the Type 1 theme?
I think there were paints of Denzel's character to, like, especially near the very end, or probably throughout it a lot, because, like, his never-ending quest to, like, get to righting the wrong of the person who's done the ultimate wrong, to keep pushing regardless of, my career, you might elevate my career really quickly because you want me to shut up, right? He's like, nope, it's not going to stop me. I'm going to keep going.
Yes.
So it's just this painting, I would say, of oneness, even in his character and his pursuit for the right thing and to do the right thing, to correct the things that have been wrong, pass from the heist onto the detective.
Good call out, because you're absolutely right. I mean, he got the promotion. I mean, for playing along with the Jodie Foster character and giving her what he wanted, he was, got that return. He actually recorded part of the conversation with her and the mayor too, so he had a little bit of blackmail off them, but he didn't use it, right? I mean, he used a little bit, but then gave it to them, and you're right, pursued the crimes. And for him, Arthur Case had not paid big enough price, because he gave her evidence to go to the UN War Crimes Commission to pursue justice on Arthur Case. TJ, anything you would add? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, to build on that, that's also after his supervisor has told him, close the case.
Yes.
It's done.
Yeah.
And that character in general, in some ways, isn't necessarily a stereotypical one, but
there's a bit of one going on.
Integrity.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very one-ish in that he's all about integrity. He's a genuinely good police officer. He cares. He demands respect from other characters like Willem Dafoe's cop character, who's, initially kind of dissing him. Right. He's also, you see him interviewing a bunch of the different hostages, because that's part of the complexity, is it's not quite clear who is a hostage and who is actually one of the robbers. And he's humorous and compassionate as he does it, as well as effective. He's also really smart. He figures out that the robbers are stalling for time. He's brave. He goes in unarmed at great risk to himself. So he's kind of like this perfect person in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Including being a well-rounded perfect person. He's not this stiff, upright icon of moral rectitude, although he has that dimension to him. He's also funny and charismatic. Yeah. He's got a lot going for him.
And adding to that, even like his home, he was housing his girlfriend's brother, who wasn't doing anything for his own life. Just these elements, like you said, these one-ish elements of like, oh, I'm still helping, taking care of such and such, and trying to improve the lives here. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. There was that sub-theme of the missing money from the drug raid, and that he was under investigation for. And it was interesting because, he's at the beginning of the movie, he's about to be interviewed by the Internal Affairs Bureau in investigation. And by the end of the movie, they find out that he has been cleared. And when they ask him, do you want to know where we found the money? He said, was it in my bank account? And they said no. And he said, was it in my summer house in the Hamptons or whatever, which he doesn't actually have? They said no. And they said, well, then I don't care. And that was the end of it, right? And so again, it was this moral integrity, I think, came clear.
Yeah, one more thing, just a quick theme. One of the victims who's sent out early is a character called Vikram, who's a Sikh. And the cop immediately misidentifies him as an Arab and slams him to the ground and hurts him, and then takes off his turban, assuming he's a bomb. So later when they're interviewing him, the fact that the persistent racism that he's on the receiving end of as a Sikh post 9/11 is part of the conversation. And I don't know for sure, but I'll bet you anything that's another edition of Spike Lee's. Is like, there's racism all over the place. Black people are not the only recipients of it. And again, Denzel Washington's character is able to deal with them honestly.
Yeah.
And even make a joke with him.
Yeah, and it's a great line, the way that scene ends. Where it's like, but I bet you can get a taxi, huh? So.
Yes. And just even building on that, like the hints, the critiques of capitalism, the critiques of how the cops dealt with people when they came out, first shooting them with rubber bullets before being like, hold up, like these can be innocent people, stop,
right.
Like there's these little bitty critiques, like you just saying, TJ, that like Spike throws in. It's like here, like there, that aren't with the main theme, but they also are things that are super relevant to what's going on in our current climate and culture.
Yeah. And I think he did that in a way that's not ham-handed, right? Showing the police brutality or the violence inherent often in police work, but also capturing the fear of police and how, again, nobody can argue that there are not abuses, but I mean, raise your hand if you would like to be a cop today, right? I mean, what more challenging job could there be than, having to be a police officer and navigate these? And even the police officer that he talks to, the one that first discovers the bank robbery and is talking later with about the kid who pulled the gun on him and uses some racist terms. And, so this is one of the scenes where another scene where race enters into it. But it's hard not to have compassion for that police officer, right? In, again, kind of the circumstances that he had to deal with and that he's operating. So shows the complexity of this issue, right? That racism is a problem without a doubt, okay? And structural racism is a problem. And it's not always black and white, right? In these sort of situations. Okay, so this brings us to the end of our Spike Lee marathon, and our podcast is shorter than Malcolm X, but perhaps not by that much. But this has been a fantastic conversation, and again, I think Spike Lee is an underappreciated filmmaker. The Five Bloods, I think, was a great movie on Netflix recently. I think that came out last year, straight to Netflix. Excellent movie. Again, uneven, like some of Spike Lee's movies can be. But if our listeners have not dived into the work of Spike Lee, these 4 movies are a great place to start. Again, I would also add, like we've talked about before, the 25th Hour and Clockers. Have either of you guys seen 25th Hour with oh boy, what a good movie. The guy from Fight Club. What was his name, TJ?
Edward Norton.
Edward Norton, thank you. Yeah, really, really good movie. And Brian Cox, who I just love, plays his father. Rosario Dawson is in it too. Excellent. I highly recommend adding 25th Hour to your Spike Lee marathon. And Milton, thank you so much for joining us. For bringing your knowledge and experience to the show. Again, I just want to reiterate that people can find you on, give us your website again,
KaizenCareers.com.
All right, and Kaizen is Kaizen, and check out Milton's work and his podcast and Do It for the Gram. It was a real pleasure to have you here. So thanks for joining us. Final words, guys.
Thanks for inviting me. I definitely enjoyed myself. There's a wealth of knowledge between you two. I learned quite a bit just being here about your movie and knowledge and everything from directors. And I'm thankful just for the experience, and love the work of looking at how directors and their type structure impacts their work in the world, to be honest. Yeah.
TJ, final thoughts?
Yeah, here's another Spike Lee interview quote. I don't think racism can be eliminated in my lifetime, or my children's or grandchildren's. But I think it's something we have to strive for. I'm going to keep working toward that day coming.
Great. Thanks. One final shout I want to do here. Forgot to mention who I love. Terrence Blanchard, who ended up composing a lot of Spike Lee's movies after Do the Right Thing. He did the music for the other 3 movies we talked about. Explore Terrence Blanchard's music if you like jazz at all. And also the song Alabama by John Coltrane. Plays prominently in a number of these movies, which is a great song. Coltrane, again, one of the great jazz musicians, and I encourage you to listen to Coltrane and start out with the song Alabama, which I'm sure you can find on wherever you get your music. And so this has been another episode of the Enneagram in a Movie podcast. Thank you for joining us. I'm not sure what's on tap next, TJ, but I'm sure it's going to be a bunch of more great movies and by a fascinating director. So look forward to seeing you all next time. You've been listening to the Enneagram in a Movie podcast, which is produced and edited by Seth Creekmore and is part of the Awareness to Action podcast network. Don't forget to go online and support the podcast by taking a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. See you next time.